In a time of dichotomous politics, revolutionary ferment and discussion, grave disappointment in the political system, and complicated by plague of COVID variants, many writers, reporters, political scientists talk about a liberal conservative clock on which the pendulum keeps swinging back and forth between liberal and conservative. One problem is they keep changing the definitions of liberal and conservative. Secondly, the clock analogy doesn't apply at all today because they put the pendulum on a totally different clock. It's not the same clock as the Kennedy era, which also adds to the confusion. What back then was considered conservative is now called neoliberal. And we also have neoconservatives. We have neo-fascists, neo-Nazis, and neo-neos probably. Who the hell knows? But anyway, I think what I want to do is give people a perspective. And the perspective is that of having practiced law for 60 years about, having been an undergraduate sociology student and had attended many hours of graduate class in criminology, social theory, social psychology, conflict resolution, etc. I've got many more graduate hours in sociology since I graduated from law school than I did in graduate school before law school. I've also tried criminal and constitutional cases in several different states and federal jurisdictions. For instance, California, Southern California, Northern California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas in a few jurisdictions, Mississippi, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Kansas, Wyoming, Illinois, Wisconsin, Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska, Utah, Michigan, Wisconsin, Florida, Washington, D.C., Massachusetts, and I probably forgot one or two because I didn't write them down. So I grew up in a small town in northern Colorado. We had junior high and high school in the same building and didn't graduate too many students every year. In a way, I was somewhat lucky because I like playing musical instruments and music, and I was able to play in a high school level band or orchestra for 7 years, or 6 years, I'm sorry. And I got a lot of good experience that way, leading to a few music offers and things such as that, which I stupidly declined Now, Loveland, where I grew up, was very, very conservative. It was a town of under 4,000 or between 4 and 5,000, I'm not sure. But we lived out in the country, which meant I had to take a school bus every day to go to school. I really didn't like standing out in the cold in the wintertime waiting for a bus. Our nearest neighbor was about a half a mile away, and the nearest neighbor with anybody my age was about a mile away. So I had a lot of time to spend by myself, and I spent that time mostly reading, playing my French horn, and getting into trouble, I guess. We had cattle where I lived, and I was always admonished not to go play with the food when I went outside. A lot of my playtime was spent in alfalfa fields and various pastures. And by the time I got out of high school, I vowed I'd never set another irrigation dam, break ice on another watering trough, or throw another bale of hay. And I kept that promise from that day forward and feel lucky to have done so. I don't have any nostalgia for agricultural life. In fact, I didn't like it much at all. We had a quarter section of cherry trees, and Loveland was sort of a cherry capital at that time. I worked out in the cherry orchards when I was young and got paid the same as all the other pickers by however crates of cherries I could submit to the scale at the end of the day. It was an interesting experience. I learned a different type of Spanish there. Most of our workers were migrant families from Mexico, and we had between 14 and 20 migrants working every summer depending on the crop and the supply of workforce, things such as that. I never was east of the Missouri River until I went to college, and I got as far east as Chicago, where I got married when I was an undergraduate. When it was time to go to college, Loveland, being a conservative town, consisted of a lot of retirees and a lot of military retirees. This was the Cold War era, and our main focus in that age was to keep up with the Russians. And when the Russians sent up Sputnik, it caused a whole revolution in educational behavior. They singled out a few of us and said we're going to be the new scientists that defeat the Russians, and we couldn't lose the Cold War at any cost. Well, there were some other things going on politically then too. General Eisenhower, or President Eisenhower, was beefing up the military and also science projects. His brother was a university official, I think president, and he had a great deal of respect for the university. Another thing he did was, during his administration, was build an international or interstate highway group. So there were real interesting times back then. One of the real funny things happened with the rabid anti-communism is that part of the state of Colorado decided that the students at University of Colorado were liberal and commies, and there was a big battle going on in academia between Professor Rozek, who is a conservative political science professor, and a sociologist who is the sponsor for the Young People's Socialist League, named Alex Garber. Alex was pro-union and pro-liberal, pro-socialist, and they used to debate each other on television. And I think Garber was such a much better debater that it probably added to the reputation of University of Colorado being a commie institution, which it most certainly was, because it was the hub of military industrial complex activity there, and intelligence activity. The Navy ROTC curriculum was a supplier for Office of Naval Intelligence, and there weren't any bodies of water nearby. The language school in Monterey started out at University of Colorado. The National Bureau of Standards, now NIST in Boulder, covered all of the workforce for the Manhattan Project, and things like that was going on, or were going on. The social life of my parents was the church, Masonic Lodge, the Elks Lodge, and the Vets Club. My father had been a national or a statewide officer of the VFW, and his whole social network consisted of members of the VFW and other service organizations. He had attended, but didn't graduate from University or Northern Colorado, or Colorado State University at that time, which was known as Colorado Agricultural Mechanics. And his older brother was a graduate there in the civil engineering area. When he got out of engineering school, he went to work for the Soil Conservation Service and ended up as a territorial engineer for the territory and later state of Hawaii. When he retired from the federal government, he became a state engineer with the Water Conservancy District. My father was the epitome of a bureaucrat. He was anal retentive and was the water commissioner for the Colorado Big Thompson Project, which controlled the headwaters of the Colorado River and diverted Colorado River water over to the eastern slope, and was in charge of all the flow of water and allocation of water between the headwaters of the Colorado River and the Nebraska border. He was pretty well known, and probably you would say he was powerful. The Big Thompson Project worked with the Bureau of Reclamation, the Federal Power people, Corps of Engineers, and all kinds of alphabet soup type things. When it was time to go to school, he was rather cheap and said he would in no way support my going to the University of Colorado. I wanted to study engineering there, or Colorado School of Mines, and was admitted both places. But his view was that I should go to Colorado State University, which was about 12 miles away, live at home, commute, where he could keep an eye on me and make sure I did okay. And also, if I wasn't going to be an engineer, he wasn't going to give me any money either, because if engineering was good enough for him and his brother should be good enough for me. And aside from which, it was my patriotic duty to be an engineer, to make sure the goddamn Russians didn't get us and beat us and attack us and things like this. Growing up was kind of funny. You know, most schools back then had.
I thought his house was so cold, and I had.
Okay, what?
Are you doing something?
I was videoing. Go on.
He said her house was so cold.
Well, yeah, I know. I got this full blast and I'm sort of cold, so.
I said her house was cold.
Yeah, it's cold in here too.
Well, it's not cold.
I was getting ready to go get some pajamas, but now that I've got a break here.
You got the fireplace on, don't
Yeah, but it's still chilled in here.
you? She's got her, oh my God, chilled, and then something's wrong with
No, there's a draft coming in from on my
100
legs.
degrees.
That's why I was going to go get my pajama bottoms.
Oh, yeah. Well, she had her house at 65. I got mine at 70.
Who?
I think she keeps it at 65. You need to move around a little bit.
I moved around a lot today. I went to the bathroom 3 times and went out to the kitchen once.
Here, styrofoam. Here,
What was that?
styrofoam. You want some?
No.
Okay. Oh, it's really hot in here. You're gonna freeze it come out here.
We'll leave the door open a little.
We better climate you to it.
What?
Let me turn this off.
No, not yet.
Okay, well, yeah, you're gonna freeze me. Come out here. Really, about 5 degrees different.